When rapid speed down to 2500.
Point wherever you reduce speed to 180.
BlackBox.
Hey, welcome back to the show. Kenny Porter here, KP's Black Box. Today is going to be really exciting. It's going to be a little different than what I've been used to, which is having somebody on the other side of the room over there to talk to. Today, I have a new friend of mine for about a year now. We've known each other, Mr. Lucas Skrobot, and that is one of the craziest last names on the planet. Let's talk about that today, where that came from. But you, with the technology and all of these dudes that know what they're doing with audio and video engineering, they're telling me that you will see my friend Lucas here on the camera. So with that crappy introduction, Lucas, man, we finally have done this.
Kenny, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you today. You are an entrepreneur of many aspects.
That's the problem. That's the problem with my life, Kenneth, is that I haven't found that pigeonhole, at least not well enough to stick myself in. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs like that. I'm a jack of all trades. I'm so out there that you can't even put me in a box. And that, I think, for entrepreneurs, that's something that harms them more than it does hurt them.
Yeah, so we're going to hone in on that today and let our listeners know what you've done. But what's really cool about you is that you've done some things all the way over in the Middle East to, right here in the lower 40, we would say. So you've got a pretty broad breadth of experience, and so does your wife, by the way. By the way, how are
wife is doing amazing.
And kids,
my wife
beautiful
is
kids, man.
My wife is the reason for my success. On multiple levels, my wife is incredible. We have 4 young boys, from 1 to 3, 6, 8. So that's kind of their age right now. So we're in the thick of the weeds, the thick of it. But man, I'm telling you, kids are great. Kids are blessings. Don't let the spirit of the age, the anti-human spirit that is plaguing this generation, that really is tied into this nihilistic worldview, don't let it tell you otherwise. Kids are awesome. Yeah. The more of them, the easier it becomes.
And you got away with, Rachel's like 16, so I don't know how you avoided the law with, having such a young wife. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's signs that make you wonder.
Right. Beautiful family. Cheers to you for that. So, hey, one of the things I always like to do, and I'd shared with you earlier, and you've seen a couple of our shows, is before I ever get started, talking about you, one of the things near and dear to my heart is our nation's military. And, me being a prior Marine, which means once a Marine, always a Marine. So I don't know why I say prior.
Absolutely.
But, I've got a lot of folks in my financial services firm who are prior military, current military, from special forces to these Navy SEAL, highly trained individuals to cooks, literally, that are the backbone of our military. And so one of the things I always like to do, Lucas, is just give a shout out and a little toast. And I know you're not got a little Johnny Walker Blue Label here.
I got some coffee over here.
Good coffee. And it doesn't matter. It's kind of like communion. It doesn't matter what's in the cup as long as you're paying reverence and remembrance to, the things like what God did for us, to what our military has done for us.
Absolutely.
So cheers to our nation's military. Thank you for all of you that have served and the families that have served alongside of them. Cheers. I don't know how your coffee is.
It's delicious.
It never gets old on
Having a little shot of Johnny Walker Blue Label.
My coffee today actually comes from Yemen, so it was quite a delicious cup.
Right, so those guys know how to make some coffee over there, right? From the beans to the extraction of that bean into a powder of some sort that we pour water over. Tell me about it.
That's kind of how coffee works. I'm not sponsored by them, but they make incredible coffee. There's this roaster out of Muscat, Oman, named Windrose Coffee, and they just are world-class roasters, and they have access to some of the most unique small batch lots of coffees out of Yemen, out of these really interesting places across not only the Middle East, but just Asia in general. And so that's where I get all of my coffee from. I'm kind of a coffee snob. I mean, I'll drink
Miller House?
Starbucks
Not
if I
Miller
have
House
to.
coffee?
Nope, sorry. Not Folgers, not Millers, but, that's what
But
I like.
we have a sponsor that's kind of close to us here. So this is a time to shout out real quick to Miller House Coffee, which is my son-in-law who's behind the machine over here making all this possible. And my daughter, Sarah, they actually have this, you know what I'm going to do? What I'm going to do? Can you see that?
Oh, yeah.
And guys on camera, you can see this Miller House Coffee. I'm going to send you a bag of their coffee.
Please do. Actually, I remember I did try that coffee. I thought you were talking about like Folgers or something. That coffee, Miller House, is so good. I definitely enjoyed that cup of coffee.
Redeemed yourself. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Ian will not cut your audio off now. I will. So guess now, one of the things we do is when you become a member of our show, we indoctrinate you with a T-shirt, some swag. So you're going to get a T-shirt saying you survived this black box with KP.
Love it.
And it'll be one of a kind. And then you'll have a bag of coffee from Miller House, and you'll get a cup from our sponsors at BlackBox. You'll get a cup from Kenneth Porter and Company, which is my financial services company that helps underwrite and support these shows. So yeah, there we go. There's the shout out to all the sponsors. Love on all of them. And if you can get us some Yemen coffee, I'd love to try it. I know Ian and Sarah would love to try it too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So Yemen, that area, can we talk on that level about what you're doing? You're living over there still?
Yeah, so we live in the Middle East. We've been over there for a number of years. I'm a communication strategist working in communications, obviously, consulting, marketing, communication. So I help brands, international organizations figure out their positioning, their marketing, their communication, their content funnel, how to reach the people that they're looking to reach, and then how to bring them in and actually add value and help them in their life in the ways that they need to be helped. And so I've been doing that for a number of years. And so that kind of spans through Europe, America, and then Middle East, where we live. And a lot of these international organizations are looking for someone that is local, who's able to kind of bridge that gap. So that's a lot of what I do, kind of on the the what do you do scale. But I enjoy it. I love playing with words. I love understanding the psychology behind people. Like, why do people listen? What do people want? What are people actually looking for? And I think we have a lot of assumptions that we need to validate in that process and really get in the shoes of the people that we are trying to reach rather than becoming me monsters.
So what it sounds like to me, Lucas, is that you can help entrepreneurs, business owners, small to even C-level companies, define their message. Is that a succinct way to say it? That
is a succinct way to say it. Define their message, figure out what I like about branding is a lot of times people think, it's a logo, it's an image, it's a slogan, but what is the internal culture and how do we express that externally? And so the way that I normally work with clients is I try to figure out what is the internal culture of your company. And we have a system that we work through to really define the internal culture. How do you behave? What are actually your core operating system? And then how does that outplay into an external communication strategy in a way that is beneficial to your target audience, to your clients, to your beneficiaries, those that you're looking to serve? And so I love taking organizations through that process.
Something you developed yourself, or something you learned, through school? Where did this education come from? Where did the passion come from, you think?
Right, right. So I was studying math, and then I switched to English literature. I loved math because I think it really is, in so many ways, a study of truth. Um,
Yeah.
and literature is a study of humanity. And during that time, I was working for a startup in Denver, Colorado. They had some IP on search engines that could search the MLS according to cash flow and cap rates and all that.
So you're using some acronyms: IP, intellectual property. MLS is multiple listing service. You're talking about real estate.
Yep.
Okay.
And
Sorry to cut you off.
so from that, came out of there and started working in communication strategy, marketing, sales, and over time, from gathering from different people like Patrick Lencioni, a great book, Five Dysfunctions of Team, The Advantage. I love his book. One book if you're looking for better organizational health, and one main reason that organizations fail is not because they have a bad sales strategy, but it's because they don't have organizational health. And so I've gleaned stuff from many different people along the years to kind of develop a system that I feel works best for companies, especially brands that have a deeper kind of driving purpose. If you're selling T-shirts, I don't know how much I'll be able to help you, but if you're trying to shape culture and impact society through your business, that is definitely a place that I like to think about. I like to think about the diffusion of innovation. So there's another great book, The Diffusion of Innovation.
All right,
which
so you
talks
mentioned
about-
3 books already. So
Yes.
let's baby step those. Number 1, you had said, and my brain housing group has already forgot.
The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni.
The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni. How do you spell his last name?
I don't know. Google knows.
I got the fact checkers over here. They'll get it. We'll actually put it up on the site. So the second book was
The second book was another book by him, The Five Dysfunctions of Team. But really, what he writes about in The Advantage is also covered in The Five Dysfunctions of Team. And then the third book was Diffusion of Innovation, which is pretty much a very thick textbook, which talks about how ideas and inventions or innovations transmute throughout a society. And so there's a specific path. And the thing with society that is, I find particularly fascinating, especially with the cultural movements that are happening today, is that societies are highly complex systems. And if you don't see something operating in society, you don't feel the friction of it, it probably means that it's been optimized to function quite well. In America, actually, our society has been optimized to function quite well. And when you introduce a new innovation to society, there's often some great benefits, but sometimes we don't see the negative effects that impact may have. And so one thing that's happening right now in our universities, not only across America, but the world, that we have changed from a positioning of an epistemological positioning of the study of truth and trying to understand how to view the world. And we've shifted to how to change the world. And we've shifted to this kind of really social justice bent of how to change the world. But if we go out trying to change the world, which is the hot topic right now, before understanding these complex systems that are in the world, we will probably change them for the worse. And I that's what happened in the French Revolution. They try to change the world and they burn down all the systems. And the French Revolution happened about the same time as the American Revolution, except for France went through decades of bloody revolutions up until the point that they joined the EU. And so we need to defend against that. We need to defend our youth and our society against change for the sake of change, which is very a Marxist idea.
Yeah. Well, we're going to hit on some topics around that today because Marxism is alive in the U.S. today, and it's camouflaged as a lot of different cultural nuances, for lack of a better term. I want to go back to something in that thought process. You said a word a little while ago that I think a lot of people glaze over sometimes, and that's truth.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've heard, it seems like probably, Lucas, in the last 2 years more than ever. And I know it's been in our university system being taught, this whole new woke culture.
Right.
But what I see it coming up in the hearts and minds of young people is I'll hear young people say, and maybe you can relate to this, I'll hear young people go, well, here's my truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I go, okay, can I
Yeah.
just stop you for a minute and ask, what's your truth? Is that equal to what I would refer to as your opinion? Because
Right.
opinion is not necessarily truth. It's the basis of what you believe or think about something in a particular moment of time. But what has happened, in my opinion, is that my truth, my opinion is this, that society has taken this basis of saying we have to, at a level of almost abuse, respect another person's truth as fact and law, versus having healthy debate, which should be happening at the university level, instead of a liberal arts professor saying, we should take some opinion in society about how people should be treated, and that become law, or they get an expose or doctorates published over an opinion that's never been debated. Is that really what you're talking about here?
Yeah, talking about books, since I know that you like books, there is a great book by Dr. Stephen Hicks titled "Explaining Postmodernism," and the to give the roots of postmodernism, and because we use the word Marxist today in society kind of as a catch-all phrase. It's like, oh, that's kind of Marxist. But Marxist is part of a system of thought called postmodernism. And the things that we're facing today, like critical race theory, it is more so part of this bigger thought system of postmodernism. Postmodernism actually finds its roots all the way back in Kant, where Kant said, for the sake of my faith, for the sake of religion, I'm going to do away with reason, and I'm going to discard reason for the sake of my beliefs are, what my faith is. Yeah. And now, as a Christian, we look at from a Christian perspective, and it sounds really nice. That sounds like that fuzzy, Christianese blanket that we can wrap ourselves in. But it goes contrary to actually the teachings of Christ, which is said, those who will worship me in spirit and in truth. And so truth is something that's very important. Reason is something that's very important that we are called to as believers in Jesus to actually adhere to and follow. But this is what happened with Kant. After he said, reason is pushed to the wayside, it began to tumble into this series of philosophies where we said, well, we can't even know anything. Well, everything that we do know is being perceived through our eyes. Is that even real? Is my perspective even real? Which has then morphed into philosophies like Marxism. It's morphed into philosophies like intersectional race theory. And the Marxist theology philosophy centered around a couple of ideas. One was no private property. Two, it was there's this struggle between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, the ruling class and the working class. And Marx and Engels thought that, as capitalism grew, that spread would become greater, and soon enough, the working class would overthrow the ruling class. But what happened was quite the opposite. The poorer class, the working class, actually grew into the middle class. And that's when they kind of, after Marx and Engels, they revised their theories to say, okay, we need to move it away from ruling class and working class, and we need to move it to pitting people against each other, whether it's race or gender, identity. And that has been flooded into our Western society. And that's what we're seeing coming to apex right now within our society, where no longer can I have a rational opinion on a subject, because what they'll do is they'll use an ad hominem. And an ad hominem is it's an illegal kind of battling move in debates where instead of addressing the points or the data that's being presented in an argument, they attack the person. So they say, well, you're just a white male, so of course you'd say that. That's just coming from your privilege. That's just coming from your perspective. And so what postmodernism has done, it has reinterpreted all of literature and all of ideas through, well, who had that idea? Oh, okay, well, showing up on time was an idea from capitalism, which was an idea of the quote-unquote white man. That is actually a weapon to oppress people. We need to do away with showing up on time. We need to do away with hard work. And there's this movement across the earth to decolonize society and essentially throw away everything that has enabled us to pull people out of poverty, and it's dangerous.
Yeah, all we have to do is go back as early as last night to everything that you're saying right now showed up in media. I always like to look to see what the left media, identifying them as that. Let's just call out CNN here. And Don Lemon was interviewing the old director, White House communications director, Scaramucci, I can't remember the guy's name. But he was the comm director that got fired by Trump's administration. And this is not a love Trump, hate liberals, And here we go. I got to give this disclaimer to get people to just calm down and hear me out. But everything you just said, Lucas, Don Lemon last night was villainizing people who have a right opinion, meaning right of center.
Right.
And basically to the point of he reiterated what Hillary Clinton said 4.5 years ago as identifying some of our lower middle class people who have taken a right position versus a left position, and once again used the word as deplorables. And he justified his truth in calling people on the right deplorables. But if I say that a black person is anything other than African American, and I'm not saying I'm doing this, but I've all of a sudden been canceled. I've been ostracized from society, and even being put to the point of maybe saying I've committed a race crime. But he can call a class of people deplorable and excuse that as what's just truth. And so how do we get people back to
Well, this is intersectional race
reasonable?
theory. This is intersectional race theory where it says the more oppressed that you are, the more right you are in your opinion. So, if you are an, half Asian, half black, queer, transgendered, male, female dragon who identifies as a unicorn, you are more oppressed than a white, straight, heterosexual Christian male. And so
51-year-old male, gray hair,
exactly.
and bald,
So if
bald
you're
head,
at the
yeah.
bottom of that stack, you now have more, tags on you to then say, well, my perspective's better because I'm oppressed, which is not how the world actually works. That's not how reason works. It's not how arguments work. And so what is being done is saying, we are of this oppressed group and we're being oppressed by the rich, and we need to overthrow this system. And it's really, as I said, it's intersectional race theory where it's not enough. It's no longer the question of, did racism occur in this instance? In this interaction between these two people, was there racism? That's how we used to think about racism. Now it's not, did it occur, but how did it occur? Because it always occurs. So it's not enough to
Well,
be
I think
not racist. You have
racism-
to be anti-racist. And to be anti-racist means we say, I am a racist and I am fighting my racism every day. It is actually a religion. It is a moral philosophy where you're continually trying to pay penance, but you're never able to get there. That's what Michael DiAngelo, she writes in her book, White Fragility. It's this thing of you will, since you're white, you are evil and you will have to pay penance for the rest of your life. It is a moral, religious ideology, and it will destroy society. And or they will eat themselves. It will destroy itself from the inside out because
Well,
it
I've
can't
already
stand.
seen some of that where they who take on this position. Just in our local community, I share a quick story with you. My wife on Facebook, of all places, you can go look at this. I had a friend of mine who's actually going to be on the show today, a musician, a very talented musician. And he made a comment on Facebook about Black Lives Matter. And I took the position that he was posturing for likes and gracious pats on the back for saying such a thing. And of course, Black Lives Matter, right? Capital,
Yeah,
lower
of
class,
course.
lowercase b, lowercase l, lowercase m. But that slogan has been hijacked by capital B, capital L, capital M, who's a Marxist organization. And plenty of data out there on video of them stating themselves as trained Marxists. So that's a little bit of the backstory. So here we go. This debate, healthy debate, which is good. The only way for me to understand another person's position is to talk, to communicate, to ask questions without passing the judgment, but passing an opinion. So if I don't give you my opinion, there's no way for you to have a position of understanding. So the opinion has to be there. And if my opinion is always moving, then I really haven't settled in on what I believe to be true or truth. So this young lady takes on the position of protecting her friend, and doesn't come after me, but goes after my wife. And Kathleen, sweet young lady, not a contentious bone in her body. She's a very beautiful woman. But she and this young lady basically start a debate back and forth. And the young lady starts taking shots at Kathleen's age. And she says, I do not respect anyone just because of their age. And I thought about that, and I said, this is a problem in our society today. That if I do not respect someone simply because of their age, number one problem right there, because the people that I should first be going to glean years of understanding should be our wise citizens of age. And that troubled me more than anything else this young lady said. Is she said, I don't respect anyone because of age. And for me, if there's a 75 or a 90-year-old person in the room and there's a 22-year-old person in the room, guess who I want to go talk to, Lucas?
Absolutely.
A person with sage years. Do they have all the right answers? No, and they will be the first to tell you. The 22-year-old has 40 to 50 years less experience than that 70 to
Their
90.
brain's not even developed. The brain doesn't stop developing until you're 25. So they don't even have a fully developed brain.
Right. So young people, I implore young people today, go find some folks, especially immigrants. Go find some immigrants who are now in the U.S., who are 50 plus years old, who, as one of my great friends who's a 16-time Grammy winner, migrated with his parents at 6 years old from Romania to escape communism. And his parents left Romania with 2 suitcases, a slab of salami, and a bottle of wine, made it down to Italy, and then got friends to sponsor them in Italy to get to Canada. And then Lucas, this is an engineer, and his father was an engineer. His mom was a professional in the medical industry. I think it was medical, and if I've got it wrong, please forgive me. I don't want to give his name out. He'd kill me, proverbially. But here's the issue. This guy said, Kenny, why can't people understand what oppression really looks like? The U.S., young people today and I'll identify young people as 50 years old or younger, have no idea what it feels like to truly be oppressed. Black, white, Chinese, Japanese, especially if they grew up and they were born natural citizens right here in the U.S. When you hear stories of immigrants coming to the U.S. and why they came to the U.S., it will blow you away that it wasn't dealing with economic oppression.
Mm-hmm.
It was fear of their lives being taken from them because of a belief, because of a religion, because of a political view. And unfortunately, I think that's where we're headed back to in our country in the worst sense, unless guys like you and I can get people to truly debate, not take their opinion of truth, but debate and have understanding and true understanding. What do you think?
I think that's right. The movement that is happening right now, and it's not just in America. It's a global movement among people who hold a certain ideology, and that ideology, because it's based in postmodernism, it's based in there is that even using reason, that reason is a weapon of oppression that is being used against people. It is a movement that is against the ideas and ideals of America, and I'll put it this way. Again, back to the American and French Revolution. In the French Revolution and the American Revolution, there's a lot of similarities. There's a religious oppression, there was governmental oppression, there was this gap between those who controlled everything, those in power, and then the working class. In the American Revolution, we said, okay, we're gonna throw off these fetters, but we're not going to burn the entire system to the ground. We're going to take the wisdom and the precepts from generation and generation and generation, from John Milton and from Plato and from Aristotle, and we're going to piece together a republic in which the government serves the people, and the government, like the Constitution, is not a list of things that gives you rights. The Constitution is a list of things that limits the right of government. So, and that's where people get it very wrong. Even in this COVID pandemic, I've heard someone say, well, the Constitution isn't clear that describes you not having to wear a mask. Like, there's nothing to protect you not having to wear a mask. When really it's the opposite way around. It's the Constitution doesn't make it clear that the government can mandate people to wear a mask. Now, just so the audience knows, I wear a mask, but why do I wear a mask? Because I'm thinking about the people around me. I'm saying, you know what? It's very little for me to do to respect someone around me that they might be living in so much fear. I don't want to just be rude for the sake of being rude. Now, that's another conversation.
Here's my fear in that, and this is fear of some of my friends, and fears from the enemy, right? So
Yes.
maybe it's the wrong word. Here's my concern. It's not real fear. Fear I cast out. I, do not claim it. But concern. Here's my concern. A week and a half ago in Nashville, Tennessee, in a business meeting I was on, I like for my brain to kind of wind down at night, and so I like to watch mindless TV. Well, the mindless TV that really I'm not discrediting this movie, but what I landed on was Schindler's List.
Yeah.
And it was a heart-wrenching movie that reminded me of COVID. Because, Lucas, what these citizens did, from Poles to Jews, is they went, hey, no big deal. Just put this armband on that identifies you as a Jew. Put this armband on that identifies you as a Catholic or as a Pole. And it shocked me that the only difference in where we are right now is it was on an arm versus a face.
And I think there could, I know there are arguments that can be
pretty
made
harsh.
there, but I think there's also a lot of arguments that could say that's a really big stretch to make that as people are not being identified as a specific religious orientation by wearing a mask. But the point that I was
Costed in stores for not having my mask is in my pocket, and I honestly forget to put it on.
right. So
And
so
I've
let's
had
let's go
people-
back to the underlying premise that we're looking at here, which is the difference between the American and the French Revolution, which ties back into this mask thing. So then in the French Revolution, similar things were going on. They overthrew their government. They kicked out all of the priests. They set up a new religion. They essentially said, we are going to burn this old system to the ground, and us young 22-year-olds, we are going to create a brand new society, a society of equality, not equality of opportunity, but equality of outcome. It led to the guillotines, where each revolution ate the revolution before them, and in that society, they said the people are subject to the government, that the government rules over the people, and the government will make society equal, and a person doesn't have rights except if the government gives them, which is the exact opposite of the American Revolution. And you were talking about people who came over as refugees from Romania, out of the USSR, who were fleeing for their lives to find a better land to live in. And like you said, it's not just economic freedom, which capitalism does give. Capitalism is a system that has pulled more people out of poverty than any other system on earth. Now, but it's also, as you said, it's a place where they know that the government has limited rights and they have freedom. Where most other country, the people have limited rights and the government has freedom. And these are two big ideological differences between the push of the left and postmodern ideas, not just in America, but around the world, that globalist system saying that people need to be controlled and taken care of by the government, versus a system that says, you know what, let people live their lives. They know how to operate their lives and have transactions and negotiate the best that they can. And the government has some specific roles, which would be to create just laws, to prosecute people when they break those laws, and to defend their people from oncoming, assaults from other nations, right? That's the role of government.
Tyranny from within.
Tyranny from, yeah. So when you look at those two ideologies, that helps us bring it back to the mask argument, where we can say, okay, well, what's going on here? Is it that they're trying to mark people who aren't wearing a mask to persecute those people? I don't think so. I think the real misstep is realizing that the American government and governments elsewhere around the world have different purviews of legislation of what they are and aren't able to do. But in America, the government should not be allowed to mandate that. In my opinion, I think that people should be able to assess their own risk, their own health risk, of how they should walk that out and take the appropriate measures. So if you're 80 and you have a lot of underlying morbidities, like, yeah, you should wear a mask, you should probably stay at home, you should wash your hands 15 times a day. If you're young, you have, less than a 100th% chance of dying from this thing. You should
Unless
actually
you have a comorbid factor that plays into it.
Unless you have a comorbid factor. But so here's an interesting fact. So I have a podcast. This is stuff that I'm talking about here is similar to what I talk about on the podcast.
Tell us about your podcast real quick. What's the name of it?
My podcast is the Lucas Skrobot Show. You can find it anywhere that podcasts are found. LUCAS SKROBOT, Robot. And we talk about how do we view the world? How can we process what's going on in the world? For instance, just how deadly is COVID? There was a study that was put out by the Johns Hopkins University and then later retracted. But Johns Hopkins showed the data showing that in America, there is actually not excess death from COVID. And in fact, when you look across other fatalities and morbidities that happen year over year, such as heart disease, diabetes, etc., all those numbers have suppressed and have been replaced almost with the equivalent of COVID deaths week over week. And so and you look from 2017, 18, 19, you see, because of an aging demographic in America, you see that our death rates are rising about 1.1% year over year. And 2020, we are set to rise about that same rate from 2019. So
If I can add to that, Lucas.
Yep.
So I'm in the insurance business, and I do pretty large, what's called premium finance cases, cash pay cases with business clients. And I was talking to a CEO at one of these mutual companies that I deal with, and I am not at liberty to give their name out because I don't have that permission to do that on the show, but I will see if I can, and I'll add this as a fact check on our podcast. But one of the questions that was asked of this gentleman in a group call of the CEO, who has the numbers on his institution, was there any increased risk so far in 2020 for mortality due to COVID? You know, his answer was zero.
this is a problem. This is the problem that's happening right now around the globe. And guess what? Some nations have woken up to it. I have a source in the UAE that has told me that the United Arab Emirates is now refusing to do any more lockdowns. When this all started back in really hitting the globe in March and April, for every case that we had, every 10 cases, we had one death. So we were really having like a 10% death per infection rate. It was bad. It was scary. I think nations took the appropriate actions because we did not know what we were dealing with. The UAE shut down, all the Middle East shut down. And I think for the data that we had at that time, it seemed to make sense. I was looking at the numbers last night across the globe. Right now, for every 100 infections, we have about 1 to 2 deaths. So we went from a 10% death rate on this thing to science has figured out, doctors have figured out how to better deal with this. Maybe the virus is getting weaker. I'm not a doctor. I don't know. I'm just looking at the numbers from what I see. But it seems as though that is not as deadly as it was early on, or we've gotten better with dealing with it. But right now, it's for every, our numbers are spiking across the globe. And we look at say, well, deaths are spiking too, but we have to look at that ratio, and we see that that ratio is much lower. So is the risks that we have worth all of these shutdowns? WHO says no.
The killer, the number one killer to our economy is not because of people dying. It's because we are shutting down small business. And so when I talk to like this insurance company who's one of the largest in the country, mutual carriers, the problem is not mortality. The problem is low interest rate environment is killing the underlying yield of companies who are from publicly traded companies to privately held. When you drive down yields so low that investors, really can't put their money anywhere to get a return on capital, that's what's killing business at that big macroeconomic level. But when you go down to the micro level and you look at a business owner who owns a restaurant in Virginia Beach, and he can't open his restaurant and serve his clients who will take personal responsibility, like you said yourself, you're going to wear a mask because there's some science that says, hey, it will help protect those who maybe have comorbid factors if they decide to come out in town and shop. Otherwise, those people should actually probably just stay at home and let their family shop for them. But I don't want to get off on a rabbit trail on that. But the point in this, from a macro point of view and micro point of view, is that it's not, the economy is not being killed because people are dying.
Yeah.
The economy is being killed because the government has been buffoons.
Yes.
Sorry, government. In shutting down businesses, from our local governor to our policymakers and presidents, and even I got to call out President Trump. He tried, I'll give him that, but our incoming president, if he makes it into office, he's already promised he's going to add additional federal mandates. And I'm going, you're really, is this the plan to kill our economy? And because if you kill the economy, guess what? Suicides will go up. Alcoholism will go up. Illness will go up. And yes, then you can say COVID was the number one killer, because when you drive it back, your fear of COVID is what killed everyone.
Well, it's the policy. The policy is the number one killer. Is really what you're saying. And,
Yes.
And so there are countries across the globe that are waking up and saying, "I'm not going to play this game anymore." India, for instance, they're saying they're refusing to do these lockdowns unless there's a legitimate outbreak. But right now in America, if 3 people get it in a certain community, they consider that an outbreak. 3 people. Another thing, in Japan, in the month of October, there were more suicides in Japan than deaths for the entire year so far, entire COVID deaths in Japan. And now, granted, Japan has a very high suicide rate already. It's been growing.
Yeah.
But this has exacerbated that problem. Right now,
Let's go back to that for a second with Japan. Let's think through that for a minute. The Japanese aren't known to be loving, touching, hugging people. So if I don't have community, if I don't establish community with people, and if I don't have that community behavior where we as human beings who draw energy from each other, draw inspiration from each other, if we get in our own little capsulized moments of going, woe is me, well, guess why suicide rates go up? You have no one to converse with. You have no one to empathize with. You have no one to share in celebration with. And that's why young people, I saw a pitiful story about a young football player, I think it was in Pennsylvania last week, who took his life because his school system had taken his football away from him, had taken his communication with his friends away from him. And yeah, we look at that and go, well, man, is there something going on in his house? Is he weak-minded? Well, what if he was? And you take away the therapy of the things that keep him going. I'm getting fired up, Lucas.
Yeah, it's the hypocrisy that we're seeing across America. I think if we easily talk in that context, because that's where we are, that's probably where most of your listeners are. Right now I'm in Colorado. Restaurants are not allowed to be open, but they're allowed to do.
Tell me you're smoking some weed in Colorado.
Right, but what they are allowed to do, what restaurants are doing, they are building or setting up a tent outside of their shop, an enclosed tent, so you can eat in the enclosed area outside of your restaurant, but you can't eat in the restaurant. Or for instance, we can still fly, and when you're on an airplane, you can take your mask off and you can eat food. Well, you're right next to people. Like how is that different from?
But when you put food in your mouth, the spores from COVID do not transport.
Oh, is that it?
Right. Yeah, right.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
wow.
That's my research.
And so I think this is the thing that gets under my skin. It's the double standards. It's the fact that in the great state of California, a strip club can be open, but churches can't. It's the hypocrisy of the fact that Target can be open, but small mom and dad shops can't be. We are witnessing the greatest transfer of wealth in the history of mankind. The greatest transfer of wealth. There must be, I have not followed the money. I have not done the research. I do not know. But from the surface level, you have to say there must be some people who have some incentive to not make this go away very fast. But it's going to be at the detriment of the livelihoods of millions of people, not just in America, but across the globe.
Yeah, if you can use a mass to send an agenda to work on a science project that studies how can we control human beings. To me, that's what the mask gives the puppeteers. Mm-hmm. How can we control citizens? To what level can we get them to put an armband on and identify who they are? Is that what's coming next? If I am a person who rejects a vaccine, will I have to wear an armband that says I'm a no-vaxxer? Now, by the way, those who want to start hating on me, I'm vaccinated. My children were vaccinated.
Likewise.
I'm not saying negative Nancy, to vaccines. I think there's vaccines that can help. I think there are well-intended people who want to help. I've got an infectious disease physician as my doctor. I mean, as one of my clients, and she's a great woman. She's well-intended. She wants to help people. But to your point, I think policymakers have hijacked a virus to carry forward an agenda of manipulating citizens into what it is they want them to do. Your thoughts?
I'm gonna kind of tangent off that a little bit. I know that we're probably running short on time.
13 minutes.
You talked about immigrants coming. You've touched on the Holocaust and Catholics and Jews in Poland having to wear armbands. And I know how much you like books. And so I'm currently reading this book called Ordinary Men. And it's this fascinating story of the German order police. Now, these were policemen who, if they were younger, they probably joined the order police so that they wouldn't have to see the front lines of battle. They didn't necessarily agree fully, or they were older, in their 40s and 50s men who were a part of the order police or conscribed into that. And the story of
AKA the tattletellers is what they were.
The story of the order police is they were brought into Poland to liquidate the Jews. And what's fascinating in all of this is that, I've not finished the book, but what's fascinating in all of this is that they were given a choice. They were given an option. They said, if you cannot do this, you are free to leave. And, many times after the stories, the accounts of people who were in the order police from the trials, the documents that have been preserved, they share about how many times a soldier would come and they wouldn't say, you need to stop this. This is wrong. This is evil. We have to stop what is happening as they take women, children, men out to a ditch outside the city and shoot them in the grave. They wouldn't say, this is wicked, we need to stop. They would say, I am not strong enough to do this. I am not able to carry this task out. And they'd shift the blame from what's happening to a personal responsibility, a personal strength to be able to carry this out. And that's how some men would excuse themselves. But other men, even though they were getting violently ill from shooting thousands of Jews in a day, I mean, literally, some days 3,000, 6,000 Jews liquidated in a day. They'd go in, they'd tear these men, women, and children out of their homes, put them on trucks, truck them outside the city, and for the entire day, it would be shooting brigades in shooting people in trenches. Men would be digging themselves out of bodies after being shot and survived, digging themselves out trying to survive. Men, the German order police who were doing this would get physically ill, have the option to leave, but choose to not leave because they didn't want to leave their brother in arms or comrades to do this evil work alone, not because they loved doing it, because they felt they were abandoning their friends to do it by themselves. But what I find so fascinating is in this, as he talks about it, that they were ordinary men. They are no different than you and I, and we have that same capacity for wickedness and evil within ourselves, and that should scare us. It should scare us that we are no different than the men who sent millions of Jews to the gas chambers. We are no different than the men who committed genocide throughout the ages. There is something in us. There's a fine line between sanity and insanity that any of us can cross over. And I think that should put a level of fear in us to say we have to have a fortitude to stand up for truth, to stand up for those who are being oppressed, even if it might cost our lives and our families.
I concur with that. And, one of the things that I've seen just over these, I try to pride myself on being a person who really tries to take a middle position on most topics. And even in my spiritual, religious faith and my beliefs is be open-minded to the fact that I could be wrong about something, and search my heart for what I'm wrong about versus this law stance on what I'm right about. And I remember a pastor saying once, it's not good enough to be right. You have to be reconciled. And I think that's where we are in a society today, is we've got these positions that people have taken that if they don't give up their right, or they're not giving up their right in such a way, in such a passion, that there's no opportunity for reconciliation. And that's where I see the fringes of where we're at today, Lucas, is that people have put themselves in a position like, well, man, if I change my position, I'm going to have mud on my face. I'm going to look like an idiot to now come back to left of center or right of center, and come with my brother or sister, my fellow human being, to respect and debate things that we believe so that we can get along. And there's a great book, we need to put this one on the site, that a pretty liberal writer, but I would say decent writer, very good writer, Thomas Freedman, and Lexus and the Olive Tree, old book, and I would encourage people to go back and read it, because he talks about in the Middle East with the Jews or the Israelis, that there was this 2,000-year problem of systematic misunderstanding. That systematic misunderstanding is that Palestinians were taking such a hard position on their land, their rights, their history. Israelis were taking such a hard position on their rights, their land, their God-given right. And these things were being politicized and debated, and people being murdered over it. But when you went back to the small communities, and those small communities in Palestine and the border towns, what you found, and actually one of our co-friends who lives and serves in the army in Israel, is that for the greater majority of folks there, they go on their daily lives of Palestinians and Jews living together in relative harmony, even though they know, hey, we've got some differences. You believe in a different Messiah or God than what I believe in, but hey, we got to work together. We got to live on this planet together. Currently, Mars is not colonized, so we got to get along. And going back to a guy years ago in the streets of LA, Rodney King, can we all just get along? Can we all find a way to find harmony here on earth in our differences and beliefs, and say, what was this country truly founded on? Did we make some mistakes? Yes. Did we screw up along the way? Yes. Will we screw up into the future? Yes. But are we willing to reconcile those differences, to live together on this planet for the betterment of all human beings? That's my message.
The question.
Yeah. Can we do that? What's your think? What's your thought? Do you think? What you think? Do you see hope? Do you see a potential for us to come on the other side of this better?
I definitely think there is hope. I think that in many ways we have lost our ability to have conversations where we disagree with one another. Where when we do disagree with one another, we just cut those people. Micro cancel culture, where we just cut people
Take them
that
off my Facebook, my Instagram.
Yeah, cut people that disagree with us out of our lives. I think in the vice presidential debate, if for those into American politics and watch that, Vice President Pence had this great response to this question that this young girl asked about this division in America. And what he said was similar to what you said, is that the media is pitting people against one another. Now, maybe that's nefarious, And maybe it's they just want to make money. And the way that you make money in a 24-hour news cycle and clickbait is to go to the fringes and the edges and to create stuff that is controversial and causes people to click. And so Vice President Pence was saying how, it's causing there to appear to be this massive rift in at least American culture. But then he mentioned a story of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late Supreme Court Justice, and Thomas Clarence. And Ginsburg is far, 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 far left. Thomas Clarence is far, 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 far right. They disagreed on pretty much everything. But after her death, it came out that their families were actually quite close friends. They would often have dinners together. Wow. They had a very close friendship. And he said, you can see in the media that it seems and it feels like when you go onto Facebook and Twitter and Instagram or whatever platform you consume, that it's just mayhem and chaos. But really, when you break down to societal level, demographics show that's only 7% are on the right or the left, and the other 80% is in the middle. And they're like, well, we're doing life, and we're going to move on with all of this.
And the media is giving the attention to the fringes
because that's what pays the bills.
Right.
So I have a level of empathy towards that, while at the same time realizing that there could be some nefarious motives that are also going on based on who stands to gain what. But I think there's a lot of hope, and that's what I do on my show. Going back to the whole thing of change versus understanding the world, I started off my show talking about purpose and meaning and be a change maker and change the world. And I realized that my audience that I was talking to, the people that I was talking with, they all want to change the world. They all are searching for meaning and purpose, but they don't understand the world, and they have cut off the branch that they're sitting on, which is truth. And so it's rationality has brought us up to this, most amazing place in the history of mankind. Like we are blessed and lucky to live in such an incredible day, and it has happened through systematic, regimented thought, through the scientific method, through line upon line, generation upon generation. And then we're cutting that off with saying, well, it all means nothing anyways. There's no such thing as meaning. But then we're going to go out and try to find my personal meaning, going to go out and find my personal truth, my personal purpose, and then hopefully try to change the world, probably for the worst. And so I shifted because I realized I was talking about meaning and purpose, but there was nothing to ground it in. And that's where I about a year ago, I shifted to talking about how do we see the world? How do we understand the world? How do we view the world? How does society fit together? Because if we can understand that, then we can be rooted and grounded in reality, in truth, in reason. And from that, we can find purpose. From that, we can find meaning. And from that, we can make an impact in the sphere around us for the better by serving other people, not looking to make a name for ourselves, rather than going out and frantically, anxiously trying to find meaning and purpose through making some impact, but really leaving the world, at least not a better place.
Lucas, that's beautiful, and I think that's a great place to end today. I would love to continue this conversation with you. So I'd love to say, hey, man, can we get you back on a couple other shows where we can really talk about your ability
Anytime.
as an entrepreneur and things that you can do to help young and old business vets alike, like myself. I want to talk to you off camera about some of the help I think you could do with us and
I have plans
our
for you,
reach.
Kenny. I have plans.
I'm
I have
excited.
plans for your life.
I'm excited. But dude, you're a wealth of knowledge that I even learned some new stuff from you today, and you've encouraged me to go back and study and read on the French Revolution at the same time the American Revolution is happening.
I have a great podcast on it, so go check out the podcast.
I'm guilty in complete transparency. I've not listened to that yet, but I'm a new fan. I really sincerely mean that, and I'm going to add you to my list. And I'm sorry it's taken us so long. It's on me. that we haven't done this sooner. But dude, I really, really thoroughly enjoyed this today and wish that we could go longer. But you know, people can't stand to look at this face, but like an hour at a time. So, you know, I got to give them a break and, you know, let them heal. So, you know, you on the other, you usually have an ascot on, by the way. Where's the ascot?
You know, I don't have my ascot with me, sadly.
I saw that and I was like, dude, I'm a little disappointed that you didn't wear an ascot for us today.
I'm sorry.
So next podcast, next video podcast, you'll have it.
I'll make sure.
When are you headed back to the Middle East?
By the time this is aired, we'll be back home. Yeah, in the Middle East. So
awesome.
Next time I'll come to you live from the Middle East, and we'll have much more to talk about, I'm sure.
So cool. It's on my bucket list to make it there. So can I couch surf?
There's a room waiting for you.
That'd be cool. Well, hey, best to Rachel and your kids. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Happy holidays, and may 2021 be your best year yet for you and your family. And hopefully we'll be able to chat here real soon and help each other expand our horizons and territories.
Thanks, Kenny. Thanks for having me.
All right. Take care. God bless.
Bye-bye.
See you, man.